Friends and family, welcome to First Congregational United Church of Christ. For many of you, this is a welcome home to a sanctuary that is of profound personal resonance. Today we gather in the protective shelter of love. We gather to pour out our grief and name our gratitude. We gather to comfort and to support one another in our common loss. And we gather to celebrate the life of Georgina Harris, Georgie, to those who knew and loved her. Let us turn to number 54 in our green hymnals and join our voices in song.
My baby sister, I'm bossy. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here and celebrating Mom's life with us. Even though the name doesn't match, in case you don't know, I'm Georgie's eldest, the bossy one. For everything, there's a season and a time for every matter under heaven. a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Ecclesiastes 3:1-8. It signifies that life is characterized by cycles and that every event, action, or stage of life has its appropriate time. One of Mom's first cycles involved being born with red hair in a family that didn't have any. Her siblings certainly didn't have any, and still don't. Where are you, Uncle Bill? You still don't, exactly. Even before the seasonal change to gray. Hers just faded. Mine is headed there as well. One always hears about redheads being trouble. And per Mom's own words, as she wrote about her childhood, a pain of a daughter. Methinks the few stories of herself that she left on paper might be alluding to this. She and her brother John used to tease each other pretty hardcore. One of the tricks she played on him involved fireflies, of which she caught a bunch. John was sleeping in the basement, and she let them loose on him. She said he wasn't delighted, but I was. This is also the loving brother that hit her in the head with a cast iron meat grinder. And if you don't know what that is, GTS it. Google that stuff. Other stories from her hand told of practicing her golf swing in what she called the entry room. She broke the overhead light fixture. She also mentioned that one day I broke the large living room window because I had my hands full and no one would open the front door for me. A time to plant and pluck up what is planted. I saw a lot of when growing up. She and Dad got very involved in wildflowers and wildflower identification, which I feel fueled their interest in the Nature Conservancy. Anytime we were hiking or on a forced march, also known as the kids are getting on my nerves, it's time for a walk, that part of keeping us from inter-sibling foulness gave me, at any rate, an ability to identify wildflowers and appreciate the fact that one man's weeds are another man's wildflowers. She and I spent time in the wooded area adjacent to Appleton East, where she learned that a new subdivision would be going in and that all of the flora would be bulldozed. We went with buckets and shovels in hand to dig up trillium, a protected plant in Wisconsin, for replanting in the backyard. I have a significant affinity for trillium to this day. A time to mourn and a time to dance. She writes that one of the things she mourned when her father went away to World War II was that in the evening, when they had music playing, she would dance with her dad. He was a first-class dancer, and I loved to dance with him, she reported. When Mom took me, Eric Gunderson, and Bruce Heil off to see Carleton, I told you, Carol, wherever you are, and St. Olaf as prospective colleges, we wandered the grounds behind Carleton, which she attended for 2 years prior to going to Michigan State, where she met Dad. She showed us the place where she danced in an outdoor rendition of Aaron Copland's Rodeo. She proudly showed me some of the steps that she still remembered. Of course, we had to sing the melody as well so she could keep in tempo. Mom was not always an embracer, and I define that as being incredibly demonstrative with some of her feelings. She was very passionate about things, and I mean she would certainly tell you straight up if she had an opinion. However, it took her quite a while to warm up to being able to say, "I love you." She certainly didn't like what she called sappy. Do not give her a mushy card because it made her feel awkward. We always knew that she loved us, but it wasn't something that she would always verbalize. She would come up behind us when we were practicing the piano and play with our hair. That was an embrace. She would always make our favorite birthday cake. Mine was angel food with 7-minute frosting. And certainly many other things when we were growing up. As we grew older, we would kind of coax it out of her. We would say, "I love you, Mom." And at first, her reply would be, "We love you too." It was in the last several years, though, that she became a lot more comfortable replying in the first person. She was a great seeker, particularly of information. She loved to research things. She had a subscription to The Economist, for heaven's sakes. Who reads The Economist? Economists. She often pulled the latest research on medicine for my edification and kept up to date on many topics, particularly politics. She was a voracious reader, and she would scour the New York Times book review to see what people were reading and why. I'm already missing not getting her hand-me-downs with her own reviews of whether or not it was worth reading. She was on the committee that researched and found a hymnal that we just sang out of, sitting in the pews in front of you. Her last research project involved finding out if root beer popsicles were still being produced and if we could find any. Her appetite waned considerably as she was leaving us, and root beer popsicles sounded pretty darn good to her. Unfortunately, they are not being made any longer. Did you know that? What a bummer. And Susan's attempt at homemade freezer pops just weren't the same. She tried. She sought friends throughout her life, some of whom are here today in person. And by the magic of streaming, she found a few that needed some extra help getting to and from the dining room at what she liked to call euphemistically the home. She and the others were the inmates in her tongue-in-cheek nomenclature. She would gather them up and return them to the apartments after her embrace was no longer needed. One of her bridge partners was kept after, Audrey, even after she moved to another facility and no longer could be embraced. There were things to be kept and things to be thrown away. When Dad retired, she felt that perhaps she should be doing some sort of volunteer work, but nothing really tickled her fancy. She certainly didn't want to go and volunteer at the hospital in the auxiliary because they wore pink, for heaven's sakes. She really loathed that color and would gladly tell you how much. She was a regular walker and would do so early in the morning to get her back muscles warmed up. She had a long history of back problems that included a fusion in 1980. On those walks, she began to pick up litter that was often found along her route. She fancied it up with the word titivating, which means to make small enhancing alterations, which was so Mom. She did this for more than 30 years, even bringing it to her new home in Minnesota. She took it upon herself to go over to the wetlands rain garden area across the street from her apartment and pick up litter there. Consequently, a lovely friend who is here today, who works for the state of Minnesota, thought this laudatory and put her name in for an environmental award, which Mom received along with an interview on one of the local television stations. You can see this award somewhere. It's lovely. It's lovely. Yes, you will see it today. Yeah. A time to keep silent and a time to speak. Well, Mom wasn't the best at keeping silent. She would frequently be muttering something under her breath, and it was usually something that would cause some laughter to ripple through the group, or sometimes discomfort. Her inner filter was never in the best shape, and sometimes, whoo boy, When she was hospitalized prior to her entering hospice, we had her meet with palliative care. If you're unfamiliar with palliative care, they often help with pain management, but not necessarily, and the end-of-life pain management. As the RN was interviewing her, she was asked whether she was a housewife or just what she did for a living. Without missing a beat, she said, "I walked the streets." Of course, we knew what she was alluding to in her litter campaign. However, she intentionally said it that way to put a different spin on the ball. That was Mom. No filter. The only time I truly ever saw Mom speechless and stunned to tears was when we surprised her. She and Dad were planning surprise vacations for each other for a while and would take turns in the planning phase. It was Dad's turn, and he had secretly involved all of us to go on a canoe trip to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. I had a 6-month-old child who is quite a bit larger and in the second pew right here that was only nursing at the time for food, so it only made sense to bring him along. Mom told us later that she had figured out where they were going and wasn't really too keen on the idea. They arrived at the motel, and we all marched in with spouses and current men friends in tow, singing, "Do you know the Muffin Man?" This had significance because whenever Mom didn't know the lyrics to anything at all, she would use the words to "Do you know the Muffin Man?" Needless to say, she was not expecting any of us at all, and much less an infant grandchild. She had no words and just teared up. We have witnesses. Speechless Mom. Although this is out of order in the verses, it seems most important to who Mom was and what she felt was her role in life. A time to weep and a time to laugh. Mom knew how to make people laugh, and she knew that humor was a great icebreaker, as well as a way of helping people kind of relax. So many instances in which she would create ripples of laughter, even in serious situations. We were sitting in this very place. My wife was visiting, and as a means of information, Mom was doing the Atkins diet, which is very low carbohydrates, none at all, including bread. It came time for communion, and of course, the host was being passed down the pew. As the body of Christ arrived to her, she leaned forward and said, in not so quiet a voice, "This isn't on my diet." She also knew how to be slightly irreverent, clearly. During that interview with palliative care representative, which I spoke of earlier, she was asked what she felt her legacy had been, and she said, "To make people laugh." I couldn't agree more. She taught her daughters by example, and we all used humor to connect, diffuse, and entertain. A time for war and a time for peace. Mom's body was at war with itself with that faulty aortic valve that wasn't keeping blood where it needed to be, and that became physically difficult for her to manage. She didn't want any surgical interventions, and she was quite adamant about this when the problem was first discovered almost 10 years ago. The war was over as the symptoms grew worse in the last 6 months. She was ready for peace, and she now has that. Georgina Starks Harris, APIHOR, APIHOR, an acronym that she chose for herself, a person in her own right. She was indeed. Now I have the great privilege of reading a piece that one of Mom's dearest friends, her BFFF, something like that, more F's than there were supposed to be, wrote for her. Joan is a poet and does lovely work, and we asked her to do this in Mom's honor. Her center held for Georgie. So many gifts she had to share, red hair, wit writ large and sharp, a supple mind grown strong with lifelong quests, the clear will to share and care. In music, where her soul was most at home, she found nourishment, the place to restore a well-ordered core. Had Bach wandered through her door, he'd have found deep connection, adored the way her mind worked. Observer of cues more than judge, Georgie gave a big tent space to what mattered, carried burdens not hers, relieved those she loved. Born for the long race, her gravity pulled to the good of the universe. Georgie was the best of us, hope propelled, and for 91 years, her center held.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm Susan, Georgie's second daughter. I'd like to share a little bit about what Mom meant to me and some of what she taught me. First, Mom was a great role model for me. The acronym that she came up with for herself, as you know, was APAHOR, a person in her own right, and she sure was. Mom taught all three of us, her daughters, to be strong, to work hard, to be independent, and to be honest. I once asked her if she thought that I was pretty. She said, "Well, your nose is kind of funny." And, well, actually, I was okay with that. I appreciated her bluntness. I wish more people could tell things like they are. I think I could make better sense of the world if everyone was upfront about things and straight talkers and honest about things. Of course, that's not our world, but it was Mom's world. Mom was my 5th grade Sunday school teacher in this very building downstairs. After class one Sunday, I asked her if she really believed all that stuff. And I share this with all due respect to Christians in the room. She said, "No, not really." And so this was a huge gift to me because what she did was give me the ability to find my own truth, seek out what I thought was the right thing about the world, myself. She gave me the freedom to question things. I do not have but a couple memories of Mom lying to us. She was usually pretty blunt. One was when she was trying to get us into the car to go to the doctor's office for vaccines. And the other time that I remember was when she was trying to get my sister Ann to eat lamb. And Ann, to this day, is not particularly fond of lamb. Mom said, "Try it, Ann, it's beef. You'll like it, it's beef." It wasn't beef. Although Dad was the one we played piano duets with, Mom was my very first music teacher. She taught me how to play the soprano recorder when I was, I guess, 5 or 6, when we were in Fort Riley, Kansas, when Dad was in the Army. And she also directed all 3 of us in bell choirs here at this church. I didn't learn much cooking when I was growing up. Becky was the one in the kitchen. She had the interest, and she was a talented cook and baker, and I didn't want to compete with her. So I pretty much stayed out of that domain when we were growing up. But after I left college, I learned to love cooking, and Mom inspired me with her interest and talent as a cook. She shared lots of recipes with me, and many I still make. Especially meaningful are the ones in her own hand. It still kills me that Mom, shortly after Dad died, threw away her rather large recipe box with so many recipes in her own hand. At that time, she just was done cooking. She didn't want to cook anymore. And she was looking around for an assisted living place in the Twin Cities where my 2 sisters live. At the time, she said, "I'm tired of putting sherry on all my food." You are no doubt all aware of Mom's humor. I have a couple of favorite stories that I wanted to tell you. The first one occurred after my architect husband designed a master bathroom for us, and it included a bidet. And my mother said, "Well, a bidet is all well and good, but what you really need is a handsome young man to hand you a towel afterwards." Another story that still makes me giggle when I think about it. We were in Dayton, Ohio, where I live, and my whole family lives, and we were going to a movie at a small independent art theater in downtown Dayton. And we walked into the theater, and there was nobody there except for two fairly elderly couples in the back row with walkers. So as we made our way down the aisle to find our seats, she turned around and said to them, "Now, there will be no necking or carrying on back here during the movie." And I was equal parts mortified and amused. Yeah. Even in the hospital, Becky talked about her humor there. One of the nurses said to her, oh, they were all very kind, as she was about to leave the room, "Is there anything else I can do for you, Georgie?" And my mother said, "Well, you could hit me over the head." And the nurse, who clearly understood my mother's humor, said, "Maybe later." Mom was one of my best friends. I could tell her anything, and I did, good and bad. When I was down, I'd call her up and dump on her, and I would feel so much better, and she would feel so much worse. But she never complained about it. I think she knew that I was feeling better, and that made her feel good. Once when I was in junior high, I told her about some silly problem that only a child of that age can have. And later in the day, I found her in the dark, in the basement, crying. And I said, "Mom, what's the matter?" And she said, "Well, I just feel so bad for you." I was very surprised, and I learned a lot about love and compassion that day. Mom taught me that relationships need to be tended if they are going to flourish and grow. I still follow her example of sending birthday cards and holiday cards through the post. She was very attentive to those things. Mom had an aversion for pretentiousness. When Dad bought a Jaguar car, she said, "I will not be seen in that thing at the grocery store." And that problem kind of solved itself. It was a bit of a lemon and eventually got sold to somebody that liked to tinker with cars. She also was not really thrilled about when Dad wanted to join the North Shore Country Club because she thought it was kind of pretentious. But Dad wanted to play golf. It was a lovely place, and I have a lot of happy memories there. I didn't golf, but eating meals with the family and taking my young kids at that time to the pool. She was not averse to spending money when it mattered. I remember her telling me when we were back to school shopping at Heckert's Shoes in downtown, and some of you may remember, that was a really fine quality shoe store on the avenue. And the shoes there were more expensive than shoes you could probably find elsewhere. But she said, paying more for a good pair of shoes that will last longer is money well spent. So she taught me that. Mom also taught me how to fold a fitted sheet. It's not that hard, people. I can give you a lesson if you'd like. Thank you.
Have y'all tired of stories of Georgie? Thank you all for being here and for coming and listening to us. I'm Anne, the youngest of the three Harris daughters. I titled this Lessons from Mom. And I'm not going to bore you with the 60 years worth of learnings from her, but these are the things that stand out to me. Life isn't fair. Get over it. Doing the right thing is imperative, despite its difficulty sometimes. Holding yourself and others accountable is also difficult, but she taught me it always leads to the truth and to healing when you're dedicated to making that happen. Practice, persistence, and dedication leads to excellence and inspiration. Mom always showed me how, despite the perceived difficulty on my part. She showed all of us in so many ways, and flying perfect paper airplanes out of the simplest scraps of paper was one of her funnest lessons. Small actions can lead to great rewards, like picking up garbage on your daily walks for over 30 years, receiving the Watershed Excellence Award. You will see the award, I promise, and being featured on TV in recognition of it. Life's rewards come from simple acts of love, nurturing relationships in your community and making people laugh, the last of which she wanted to be the greatest part of her legacy. Be sure to always take advantage of picking wild berries and eating them on the spot, but always leave some for others. Carry a compass and a map. Both will get you to your destination, especially when you plan routes that include fewer lights and stop signs and only right turns. Only Mom could make sense of that last one. Never tell anyone you accidentally on purpose dug up and transplanted trillium plants. What happens in Wisconsin stays in Wisconsin, people. Take time to conduct extensive research when seeking answers or when purchasing something. The outcome of your efforts will be rewarded knowing you're making an informed decision or buying a quality item that, when taken care of, will last a lifetime. Anything you collect will gather dust over time. Go through your things once a year. Keep what's necessary and give what you're no longer using to others. Plan your work, then work your plan. Like mapping out comprehensive grocery lists with items arranged in columns mimicking the store's floor plan. It really helps, guys. Be patient. Know that it takes time to get chipmunks to eat out of your hand like she did. Be kind. Be loving. Be understanding. Be curious. Be active. Be helpful. Be giving. Be self-deprecating. Be yourself. Be funny. And sing a joyful song and invite others to join in. Do you know the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man? Do you know the Muffin Man who lives in Drury Lane? Yes, I know the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man, the Muffin Man. Yes, I know the Muffin Man who lives in Drury Lane.
Good afternoon. I was Georgie's pastor for 23 years, which means I bear some responsibility for the quality of her moral life. Christianity, like all major world religions, includes truth claims that challenge us, that God is both one and three, that Christ was fully human and fully divine, and that beyond this life, there is an eternal one. I've long envied those who hold a simple, sustaining faith, who do not feel the need to wrestle with these difficult truth claims. But that's never been me, and it certainly was not Georgie. She needed to wrestle with the big questions, and she never let me get away with a sloppy, sentimental sermon. For her, the ideal sermon would be intellectually vigorous, it would be wise, and it would be funny. The trifecta for Georgia. I learned recently that in her later years, Georgie declared herself an atheist. This came as a shock and surprise to me, because I'd pretty much assumed she already was one. Or at least an agnostic. The line between the two is notoriously slippery. But you know, you need to take religion seriously in order to reject it. And Georgie took it seriously. Speaking as a person of faith who loved Georgie, I hope that when her body breathed its last and she was expecting nothing beyond death, I hope that she was sorely disappointed. And if she was, the Almighty should be prepared for vigorous debate. A wise person once stated that any heaven we are capable of imagining is not worth dying for. And an afterlife of clouds, wings, halos, and harps would have Georgie making gagging noises and looking for the exit. Greg Brown, a songwriter I much admire, sang, "Just let the mystery be," and I'm content with that. I think that would have been a good conversation with Georgie. Georgie was appalled by the distorted versions of faith that lead people to embrace bigotry, hatred, and cruelty, which may have played a role in her declaration of atheism. Because if that distorted vision represents faith, atheism becomes a moral high ground. You are doing the right thing because you simply know it's the right thing, not because somebody told you to. And with Christianity, she may not have accepted the doctrines, but she walked the walk. She may have rejected Christ's divinity, but she was a friend of Jesus. As Jesus said to the annoyance of some who claim to be his followers, "Not everyone who calls me Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom, but only those who do the will of my Father." And Georgie did that. She did it consistently. She did it with style and flair and humor. She did so much. She tried so hard to make the world a better place for others, including that career in trash patrol, because even small acts of kindness and decency become a part of the resistance. And agnostic, atheist, whatever she may have been, she knew something about transcendence, which she pursued and experienced through music and literature and the arts. She knew the deeper hidden dimensions of this reality. Her life was full. Her life was rich. Her life was very, very sassy. So for all that she gave to us, and so many, for the life that she was given and the life that she created, I give thanks.
This time we'll open up an opportunity as a story or word of reflection they'd like to share in community.
Someone's got to grease the skids, right? Good afternoon. My name is Jack. I'm married to Ann, the youngest of the three Harris daughters. I remember when Ann and I were dating, she brought me to Appleton to meet her parents. And so we're in the house. This is the house on the river, not the one that you guys grew up in with the other one. So Georgie and I are standing up above looking down, and Jack and the three daughters are having a symphony orchestra going on down there. Never experienced that in that small of a setting. And Georgie was standing next to me, and she looked at me and said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "I don't think I belong here. I can't even play the spoons." It was, my heart was racing. I was like, how do I get out of this? What am I doing here? Georgie was, probably always will be, the most intellectual, the kindest, the most challenging, and the bluntest person I ever met. I am a better person because she let me and my family into your family. I loved her dearly, and I'm going to miss her. Thank you for that.
It is so much easier to share stories around tables, and so I encourage you to continue that time of sharing during the reception at Riverview Gardens after the service. Let us pray. Source of life, we come just as we are. We give thanks for the life of Georgie and to the lives of those who have known and loved her. We are grieved by a sense of loss in the face of death. The love which binds us to one another leaves us aching as ties are broken. Accept our tears as emblems of love and devotion. May they be transformed into waters of life to nourish us in the days ahead. May we be strengthened to face the future with courage and confidence. May we knit more firmly the ties of love, mercy, grace, and peace. May we laugh freely as Georgie laughed. May our prayers be heard, those spoken aloud in this sacred space, and those written within the quiet sanctuary of our hearts. Amen. And now we will join our voices once more, singing together hymn number 68. Let us rise in body or spirit.
Please be seated. Let us now go forth, taking with us our fond and precious memories. Let us go forward, taking hearts filled with gratitude. Let us depart, knowing that our own lives remain interwoven with Georgie's in a manner that reason, science, and even religion cannot fully explain. Let us go forth, trusting in the divine mystery. Go now in peace. Amen.